If you're still staring at your phone, waiting for their name to light up your screen, this is your sign to stop. Not pause, not wait, stop. Because the moment you send that one more message, you're not reaching out, you're reaching backward. And deep down, you know it's time to stop fighting for someone who isn't fighting for you. Something incredibly powerful that happens the moment you decide not to text them again. It's not about playing games or trying to manipulate a reaction out of someone. It's about reclaiming your energy, your worth, and your emotional control. Because every time you're the one who reaches out, checks in, sends the funny meme, or tries to keep the spark alive, you're giving away a little more of your power. You're reinforcing a message, maybe not intentionally, but it's still a message. I need your attention to feel okay. And the truth is that dynamic will never work in your favor. The second you stop trying to make the conversation happen, something shifts, not just for them, but for you. You start to see the situation for what it really is, not what you wish it could be. When you always initiate, you're making it too easy for them to sit back and contribute nothing while still enjoying your effort. You're keeping the connection alive with CPR while they're giving you nothing in return. That's not love, that's not connection, that's emotional exhaustion masters loyalty. When you go silent, not to punish but to protect yourself, you break that pattern. You interrupt the cycle, you stop begging for crumbs and start demanding peace. That moment, you don't send the message, don't follow up, don't respond right away is the moment you start resetting the balance. And here's what most people don't realize. When you stop, they notice. Maybe not immediately, maybe not dramatically, but they do. Because when you were always there, your presence became expected. When it vanishes, the absence speaks louder than your words ever could. Silence isn't weakness, it's the ultimate strength. It's saying, I'm not going to keep giving to someone who doesn't know how to receive me. It's choosing to believe that if someone truly values you, they'll find a way to show it. You don't need to keep proving your worth in texts, emojis, or late-night check-ins. The moment you stop reaching out, you give them the space to either step up or step out. And either way, you win, because you stop wasting your time in the gray zone and start moving forward with dignity. You teach people how to treat you by what you allow, and when you stop texting someone who doesn't reciprocate, you're sending the clearest message possible. I value myself enough to walk away. You're no longer sitting around waiting for someone else to decide your value. You're not asking for reassurance, you're giving it to yourself through action. And in that moment, even if it feels hard, you take back control. You stop waiting. You stop wondering. You stop bleeding your energy into someone who never deserved that much access to you in the first place. If they wanted to talk to you, they would. It's one of those hard truths that stings at first, but once you fully accept it, it sets you free. We live in a world where it takes less than 10 seconds to send a message. People are glued to their phones, scrolling, tapping, reacting, constantly connected. So the idea that someone didn't have time to text back, or forgot, or meant to reply but didn't get around to it, starts to sound less like a reason and more like an excuse. Because when someone genuinely wants to hear from you, talk to you, be close to you, they find a way. They make time. You don't sit there wondering where you stand or why there's been radio silence for days, because they show you. But when you're stuck in this limbo, waiting for that reply that never comes, it eats away at you. You start doubting yourself, overanalyzing every interaction, rereading your messages, trying to find out where you went wrong. You assume maybe you were too much, maybe not enough, maybe they're just busy or going through something. But what you're really doing is giving them the benefit of the doubt over and over, even when they've shown you They're not choosing you, and that pattern of excusing their silence only delays the inevitable realization that if they truly cared, you wouldn't be chasing them for a response in the first place. You don't need to be chasing someone who isn't chasing you back. You don't need to keep proving you're worth their attention. That kind of effort only goes one way, and it never ends with the kind of connection you actually want. What it does end with is frustration, low self-worth, and a lot of wasted energy. You're not asking for too much when you expect someone to communicate with you. You're asking for the bare minimum. Respect, interest, consistency. And when someone doesn't give you that, they're showing you something very clearly. They're not invested. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. It doesn't mean you weren't good enough. It just means that their priorities don't include you right now, and your job is not to try and force them to care. Trying to make someone respond, care, or step up when they've shown you otherwise is like trying to light a fire with wet matches. No matter how much you try, it just won't catch. And every time you reach out, hoping this time will be different, you're keeping yourself stuck in a dynamic that isn't giving you anything back. You deserve effort without begging for it. You deserve a connection that flows naturally, not one that needs constant resuscitation. The ones who want you in their life will make space for you, and the ones who don't, well, their silence is the answer. You just have to be strong enough to hear it. Silence is often misunderstood. People think saying nothing means giving up or being weak, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Silence is one of the most powerful statements you can make, especially when you're walking away from someone who took your presence for granted. It's tempting to want closure, to explain how they hurt you, to send that one last message that you hope will finally make them understand. But in reality, those long emotional texts rarely change anything. If someone couldn't see your value when you were showing up, explaining yourself won't make them suddenly realize what they lost. What does make an impact, what truly gets noticed, is the absence of you. When you stop speaking, when the texts stop coming, when your name no longer lights up their phone, it forces them to feel something they never had to face before: life without your attention. And attention is powerful. Maybe they didn't appreciate your check-ins, your consistency, your care. But the second all of that disappears, they start to notice the void. Not always right away, and not always with an apology, but it registers. Because silence demands reflection, it invites curiosity. It leaves room for someone to ask themselves, why did they stop trying? When you're always explaining, always reaching out, you're filling the space with noise that gives the other person an excuse not to feel the weight of what they've done or failed to do. Your silence, on the other hand, holds them accountable. It's uncomfortable, it's unfamiliar, and it's real. Silence can't be debated, it can't be misinterpreted, it just is. And in that stillness, you begin to regain something you might not even realize you lost. Your emotional peace. No more waiting for replies. No more second-guessing your words. No more placing your self-worth in someone else's hands. Most people think closure comes from a conversation, from understanding what went wrong. But sometimes the only closure you'll ever get is the peace you find when you stop trying to be heard by someone who never listened. And the moment you embrace silence, not as a punishment but as protection, you start healing. You start seeing things clearly. How much you were overgiving, how often you ignored red flags, how deeply you were holding on to someone who wasn't holding on to you. You don't need to send a final message. You don't need to get the last word. You don't need to express your pain to someone who never made space for it. Your silence says all of it. It says, I've had enough. It says, you don't get unlimited access to me. It says, I'm not waiting anymore. And the best part is, You don't need their response to validate your choice. You just need your own peace of mind, and that starts the moment you stop explaining and simply walk away in silence. You deserve effort, not crumbs. It sounds simple, but when you're emotionally attached to someone, it's easy to convince yourself that the little things they give you mean more than they actually do. A text after days of silence, a random compliment when you're about to walk away, or a half-hearted miss you at midnight. These things feel big when you've been starving for consistency. But they're not effort, they're leftovers. They're the bare minimum designed to keep you hanging on just enough so that you don't fully let go. And the more you accept those crumbs, the more you train yourself to settle for less than what you actually want. When someone is truly invested in you, you don't feel anxious all the time. You don't have to decode every message or wonder what you mean to them. There's clarity, there's presence, there's actual effort. But when you're in a situation where the other person gives you just enough to keep your hopes alive, but never enough to feel secure, you become addicted to the unpredictability. You start mistaking inconsistency for passion and confusion for chemistry. And that's where it becomes dangerous, because now your emotions are being manipulated, whether intentionally or not. They're training you to feel grateful for the tiniest ounce of attention, when in reality, you deserve someone who shows up fully, not occasionally. People who only give you crumbs know exactly what they're doing. They're not putting in the real work of building something meaningful, but they also don't want to lose you completely. So they offer you just enough to keep you emotionally invested while keeping their freedom. It's not love, it's control. And the worst part is, it keeps you from being available for someone who would actually choose you fully. Because while you're busy waiting for that one message, that one sign that maybe they care, your energy's being drained. Your heart is being pulled in circles. And you're slowly losing your sense of what real effort even looks like. Real effort looks like consistency. It looks like someone who doesn't disappear for days and then pop back in when it's convenient for them. It looks like someone who makes you feel wanted even on your worst days, not just when you're glowing and easy to love. And when you start holding yourself to that standard, something shifts. You stop entertaining half-hearted connections. You stop replying to hate texts that show up at 1 a.m. You stop hoping they'll change and start choosing yourself. Because the truth is, it's not about being hard to get. It's about being hard to forget. Because you showed them what it means to expect real effort. You stop rewarding crumbs with your attention. You stop allowing people to earn your presence without showing up in return. And in doing that, you raise the bar not just for others, but for yourself. You decide that your peace, your worth, and your heart are no longer available for discount. Pulling away gives space for the truth to surface. When you're constantly reaching out, constantly trying to keep the connection alive, you never get to see how the other person would behave without your effort. You stay stuck in a loop of giving, initiating, maintaining, and it's exhausting. You think that if you just try a little harder, if you just say the right thing, if you give them one more chance to prove themselves, they'll finally step up. But here's the thing, you're blocking the truth by never giving it room to reveal itself. When you're always there, always texting, always checking in, the other person never has to wonder what life is like without you. They never have to feel your absence. And without that contrast, they take your presence for granted. Stepping back feels scary because it creates uncertainty. You're afraid that if you stop texting, they'll forget you, that the silence will lead to distance and eventually to losing them altogether. But what you're really afraid of is learning the truth, that they might not care enough to come after you. And while that truth hurts, it also sets you free. Because once you know where someone truly stands, you can stop guessing, stop hoping, Stop pouring energy into a one-sided situation. Pulling away isn't about being cold or manipulative. It's about giving both yourself and the other person clarity. You get to observe, not assume. You get to step out of your emotions and actually see how invested they are or aren't. When you stop chasing, when you stop being the emotional glue holding everything together, the cracks become visible. If the relationship or connection was only surviving because of your effort, that will show. If they truly valued you, your space will inspire them to move towards you. If they didn't, the silence will stretch on, and as painful as that may be, it gives you closure in a way that 1,000 conversations never could. Sometimes people don't realize your value until your energy is no longer available to them. And sometimes they do realize it, but still don't change. That's a truth worth knowing. It saves you from months, even years of emotional confusion and false hope. Pulling away gives you perspective too. When you're not constantly reacting to their behavior, you can actually assess how the relationship made you feel. Were you anxious more than at peace? Did you feel heard, seen, appreciated? Or were you just filling in the gaps, hoping they'd meet you halfway? Distance is revealing. It shows you what you were tolerating and what you were pretending not to notice. It reminds you that someone who truly wants to be in your life will make an effort, with or without your reminders. The fear of silence is what keeps people stuck, but the truth that emerges from silence is what sets them free. And yes, pulling away may result in losing the connection entirely, but if that's what it takes to finally stop settling, stop second-guessing, and stop waiting for potential to turn into action, then that space wasn't a loss. It was a gift, because now you know. And once you know, you don't chase, you don't beg, you don't shrink yourself trying to earn love that should have been freely given. You create space for something real to enter. And you teach others, and most importantly yourself, that your love is not a tool to be used. It's a privilege to be earned. Texting them again keeps you emotionally tied in ways you might not even notice. Every message you send, even the ones you convince yourself are casual or harmless, reattaches you to a feeling, a memory, a hope. You tell yourself you're just checking in or being polite, but deep down, part of you is still waiting for a shift. You want the tone to change, the interest to spark, the connection to come alive again. And the moment they reply, no matter how cold, short, or delayed, you feel something. That small hit of validation, that flicker of hope, that temporary relief that maybe, just maybe, something is still there. But that feeling is fleeting. And what comes next is the same cycle you've been trapped in. Confusion, overthinking, disappointment, silence. Again. You can't heal from someone while staying tethered to them. You can't fully detach when your emotions are on a leash tied to your phone. And that's exactly what happens when you keep texting. You're reopening a door you already know leads to nowhere. You're putting yourself in emotional quicksand. Every message you send pulls you deeper into something you're supposed to be moving on from. The truth is, healing requires distance. It requires separation, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally. That healing can't happen if you're constantly sending little reminders of yourself, hoping they'll wake up and realize what they lost. Because every time you do that, you're not giving them a chance to miss you. You're interrupting your own progress and giving them comfort without commitment. Even when they reply, ask how you've been, or say something kind, it rarely leads anywhere new. You may feel a rush in the moment, but soon you realize nothing's changed. The dynamic is still unbalanced. You're still doing most of the emotional lifting. You're still hoping they'll one day match your energy. But if someone isn't meeting you with the same effort when you've already made it easy for them, what makes you think they'll do it later? Just because you keep showing up, they've seen your kindness, your loyalty, your willingness to stay. And if that wasn't enough for them to treat you right, then more messages won't be either. Sometimes you have to give yourself the peace of no reply. The quiet that comes when you stop reaching out is uncomfortable at first, but it's also cleansing. It's a reset. It allows you to reconnect with your reality instead of constantly escaping into your imagination of what could be. The longer you go without reaching out, the more your brain begins to rewire itself. You start seeing things clearer. You stop fantasizing about the potential and start accepting the truth of how little they gave you. You stop remembering only the highs and start realizing how low the lows really were. Letting go doesn't always come with a grand goodbye. It often comes quietly through choices you make every day, like not sending that message, not responding to their random check-in, not revisiting conversations that lead nowhere. You reclaim your time, your emotional space, your dignity. You remind yourself that love is not something you have to chase. And every time you choose silence over sending that one last text, you're choosing yourself a little more. You're cutting the emotional rope one thread at a time until you're finally free, not because they gave you closure, but because you gave it to yourself. If there's one thing you take from all of this, let it be this. Choosing not to text them again isn't weakness, it's power, it's self-respect. It's finally stepping out of a cycle that's been draining you and stepping into the peace you've been postponing. When you stop chasing, you make space for what's real. When you stop explaining, you allow silence to speak for you. And when you stop explaining crumbs, you raise your standards. Not just for others, but for yourself. Walking away doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared enough to know you deserve more. So if you're holding onto your phone, tempted to reach out one more time, stop. Breathe. Remember who you are. Let your silence be the turning point, and let it speak louder than your words ever could.